Hello everyone and welcome back to Turkish Spotlight Secrets. I hope you're having a gentle day, because what we're about to talk about is tender, raw, and very real. It begins with a quiet sentence that slipped out like a sigh at the end of a long evening: "I don't want to think about the future anymore." That confession wasn't posted, scripted, or staged. It belonged to Barış Arduç in a room that had finally fallen silent after too many interviews, too many plans, too many people asking what comes next for him and for the woman who has been both his constant and his mirror, the luminous and unflinching Elçin Sangu. Today, we're diving into that moment not as a headline, but as a human truth, and we'll trace how that single sentence shook their rhythm and slowly shaped their way back to the present. If you've ever felt the weight of tomorrow pulling you away from today, you'll see shades of your own story here. Before we begin, if you want more of these intimate, thoughtful conversations right alongside the sparkle of showbiz, make sure you subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets so you never miss what we uncover together. Behind "I don't want to think about the future anymore" lived more than exhaustion. It carried the aftermath of seasons spent drawing maps that never stopped shifting. Think of the pressure applied to two careers constantly in motion, the scripts waiting on desks, the inquiries from producers about timing, the rumor mill whispering about weddings and babies as if such milestones could be penciled between call times. Barış and Elçin had scheduled flights, premieres, brand negotiations, and 100 moving pieces, each one promising a version of tomorrow. And yet, the more they tried to choreograph their future, the more life reminded them that choreography doesn't always survive the music. A delayed project that was supposed to define a year. A director who changed the schedule last minute, turning weekends into workdays. A private plan that felt sturdy in their hearts, only to wobble under the pressure of whispers that weren't supposed to be heard at all. Each disruption chipped at their confidence that the future could be controlled if they just tried hard enough. That sentence, then, became a shield, a soft refusal to keep building sandcastles with the tide rushing in. It is also the quiet rebellion of two people who spent their youth succeeding in a world that demands a roadmap at every turn. From childhood, most of us are taught to build forward, study, achieve, save, advance. For Barış and Elçin, those steps arrived amplified by the spotlight. The public doesn't just ask what's next, it insists on it. Next series, next film, next award, next house, next chapter. Every time they landed at today, someone held up a sign marked tomorrow. For a while, it can feel energizing. When you're racing, momentum feels like meaning. But the engine overheats, and then the calendar starts dictating more than your heart does. Saying "I don't want to think about the future anymore" isn't a rejection of growth. It's the longing to hear the present again, a desire to taste dinner without discussing 3-year plans, to sit on a balcony and watch the Bosphorus turn silver without calculating who needs to be where in August. But can anyone truly stop thinking about what's ahead? Probably not, and that was the insight that came as the first heat of their argument cooled. The future nudges us out of bed, provides direction, inspires the phone call we've been avoiding, the nutrition plan, the rehearsal, the apology. The trouble doesn't lie in the forward glance. The trouble arrives when the glance becomes a straitjacket, when every hour is an audition for a life that never quite arrives. For Barış and Elçin, it wasn't ambition that hurt, it was the gnawing feeling that no matter what they achieved, the horizon just kept moving away. That restless chase left them feeling oddly absent from their own scenes. To say no to the future, in that fragile moment, meant saying yes to feeling again, however messy that might be. Disillusionment had been simmering long before the sentence appeared. They had invested hope into projects that opened with fireworks and closed in silence. There were team members who swore loyalty and vanished when the wind shifted, and deals that dimmed without explanation. Inside the relationship, the pressure of professional uncertainty cast long shadows. One week, they were working out a plan to travel together after a shoot. The next, calendars clashed and apologies multiplied. It was easy to read disappointment as personal failure. Easier still to blame the idea of tomorrow for the ache that followed. Why hope, why plan, why pour energy into a blueprint that might be torn down again? Shutting the door to the future felt safer, less humiliating. If you never extend your heart into what could be, it can't be refused. There was also the heavy, trapped feeling that sometimes arrives not with anger, but with numbness. In those weeks, the idea of a brighter future not only seemed far away, it looked like a trick of the light. How do you fight for something that keeps slipping out of view? Here's the part we rarely see in glossy photos. The quiet mornings where Elçin stared at a calendar she didn't recognize as her own, the late-night drives when Barış took the long way home because he needed a few extra minutes of sky to clear his head. In that space, withdrawal becomes a coping strategy. I won't imagine tomorrow, because imagining hurts. But self-protection, while necessary in emergencies, can turn into a habit that blocks the door to accidental joy. Even the detours of life contain opportunities. You just have to be willing to look up again. What came next didn't look heroic, and maybe that's why it worked. They didn't announce transformations or create elaborate rules. Instead, they started small. Mindfulness is the buzzword, but what it means on a Tuesday night is this: sitting together on the floor when the living room is messy and the city is loud, and letting the noise pass through instead of battling it. It's noticing the warmth of the tea and the rhythm of breath. It's catching the future tug at your sleeve and choosing, gently, to let it tug without following it out of the room. For them, this looked like morning walks without phones, like a habit of holding hands not because a camera might catch it, but because hands recognize each other before minds do. On set, when the pacing accelerated, Barış practiced a long inhale that he'd learned in a quiet session. He would exhale, look at the floor mark, and re-enter the moment. Elçin, known for her wit, learned the power of silence between thoughts, a pocket of stillness big enough to stand inside. From there, they reconsidered their pact with uncertainty. Control had been their bargaining chip, but life never promised to give it back. Accepting the world's unpredictability didn't make them passive, it made them accurate. They stopped mistaking anxiety for strategy. If the phone call didn't come, they chose a different call. If a script fell through, they reframed the gap as air to breathe, not evidence of doom. They asked a different question: what can we shape today without waiting for permission? Maybe it's a scene rehearsal at the kitchen table. Maybe it's texting a friend they love but haven't seen in too long. Maybe it's cooking lentil soup with too much pepper and laughing when it turns out oddly perfect. Small, chosen actions reminded them that the present is a workshop where tomorrow is quietly built. Part of this return was setting down perfection. Expectations had become cinematic, as if one master plan would deliver the exact skyline they had both imagined. When reality refused to match that glossy vision, disappointment felt like betrayal. So they softened the script. Flexible expectations aren't weaker, they're wiser. An unexpected role might open a path no one knew to ask for. A postponed date night, instead of a failure, could become a Sunday morning market run and a long nap, better than what was scheduled. The future might not look like the mood board, but different doesn't mean worse. Their love was resilient when it stopped trying to act like a polished trailer and allowed itself to be a living scene, with retakes, improvisations, and the quiet beauty of an unplanned shot that lands just right. When the scale of everything felt paralyzing, they shrank it. Not the love, not the ambition, just the unit of action. Even the grandest life unfolds in tiny steps. You don't solve a year at midnight, you send one email, read 2 pages, choose an early bedtime. They built a practice of asking each other, what's the next small thing? Some days, the answer was a stretch on the balcony or sorting a drawer. Other days, it was drafting an outline, opening the script without judging a single line, replying to one message instead of 50. A future that once felt like an opposing team became a series of friendly passes between them. Momentum returned, not as a sprint, but as a steady walk that rarely missed a sunrise. Gratitude did something almost alchemical. At first, it sounded like a cliché, but the act of naming what was already good altered the room temperature. Their gratitude list was not grand. The soft corner of a worn sweater. Steam on bathroom mirrors. A neighbor's cat that visited the window. A late-night playlist on repeat, turning the kitchen into a stage and the wooden spoon into a microphone. Messages from fans who wrote not only about beauty or fame, but about feeling seen. Gratitude didn't erase worry, it right-sized it. When you are busy noticing that the lavender plant survived a cold night, the question of whether July will behave starts to lose its chokehold. The present, suddenly, is not a pit stop on the way to a better scene, it is the scene. When the old fear surged back, and fear always returns for an encore, they reached for support, not secrecy. The simplest, bravest move was saying, "I think I need help." They spoke to a therapist who specialized in high-pressure lives, someone who didn't try to dim their ambition but refused to let it eclipse their well-being. They looped in friends who understood that loyalty isn't loud, it's consistent. There were calls to family, a few awkward truths, and the freeing realization that you are not less radiant for leaning on a shoulder. In a world that expects polished statements, they chose honest conversations. The relief was quiet but measurable, like a window cracked open in a warm room. So what does it all amount to, beyond a sentence spoken on a tired evening? It becomes a new relationship with tomorrow. Not a rejection. Not an obsession. A calm truce. The future doesn't need them to panic to arrive, and the present doesn't need to be sacrificed for it to be worthy. In this balance, their work sparkles again, because the cost of sparkle is no longer everything. Their home feels like a refuge, not a waiting room. They haven't promised each other that nothing will ever go wrong, they've promised to notice what is right as it's happening. And that promise, repeated in small ways, builds a life sturdy enough to hold all the unknowns. If you carry that sentence inside you, "I don't want to think about the future anymore," let it be a doorway, not a wall. Let it usher you back to your breath, back to the people who know you're laughed by memory, back to the table where dinner is ready enough. That's where change begins for anyone, celebrities or otherwise. That's where it began for Barış Arduç and Elçin Sangu, not with a grand decision, but with a soft one. To be here long enough to feel today, and to trust that tomorrow can handle itself when it arrives. Thank you for spending this time with us on Turkish Spotlight Secrets. Tell us how you navigate the tug-of-war with tomorrow. Have you felt this pull, the urge to shut it all out and just breathe? Share your experiences in the comments, we read them, we learn from them, and often, we find exactly the words someone else needed to hear. If this story resonated, like the video, send it to a friend who might be holding their breath, and make sure you subscribe to Turkish Spotlight Secrets so you don't miss our next deep dive into the real hearts behind the headlines. Until then, take care of your today. We'll meet you here when tomorrow becomes now.